I'd like to speak to number 2.
Sorry, Ron?
I'd like to speak to the agenda items on number 2.
The review and adoption of the agenda, or which item number 2 are you referring to?
Yeah, it's just the, I wanted to note something on the agenda.
Okay, we'll get started here in just a second.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted you to be aware I got something I wanted to bring up there.
What's that, sorry, Ron?
Oh, just recognize me when the review and adoption of agenda item comes up.
For sure, thank you. Just to let everybody know, I will now kind of signal for us to go public, just so that everybody knows. Good morning, everyone. I will now call this meeting of the Standing Committee on Social Development to order. My name is Caitlin Cleveland. I am the MLA for Cam Lake and Chair of the Standing Committee on Social Development. Our first order of business this morning is to open our meeting with a prayer, and I will ask MLA O'Reilly to offer our morning prayer. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We are grateful for our Northwest Territories, for our homes, for our neighbors, for our freedom. We are grateful for the opportunity we have to meet here and to serve our fellow citizens. May we bring both the strength of our convictions and the willingness to listen and learn to our discussions. May we consider the needs and aspirations of all our fellow citizens in our decisions. May we always represent our constituents with dignity, integrity, and honesty.
Thank you, MLA O'Reilly. Our next item on the agenda is review and adoption of the agenda. Mr. Clerk, would you like to take us through the agenda for today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This morning's meeting, we have a presentation with the City of Yellowknife, and then we have a second meeting today at 1 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. So now, are there any amendments that anybody would like to make to this morning's agenda?
Madam Chair, it's Ron here. I have a housekeeping regarding agenda item number 5, and it states new business, but I was wishing that future agenda items state if we're going public, if it's public broadcast. A couple of times I wasn't aware they were public broadcast, so I just thought I'd bring that up. We had it listed before. I don't know why it was taken off. Must-see.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonnet Rouge. Absolutely. We can definitely make that more clear on the agenda for future public hearings, for sure. Thank you very much for bringing that up. And we'll add that as well to the agenda for discussion of how committee would like to see that appear for later on today under in-camera matters. And so with that amendment, is there somebody that would like to adopt the agenda as amended? Katrina or MLA Nakabi, thank you very much. Having reviewed and adopted the agenda, are there any declarations of conflict of interest today? Seeing and hearing none, let's get right to it. So the Legislative Assembly's Standing Committee on Social Development is made up of regular members who look deeper into social issues affecting NWT residents. The Standing Committee on Social Development has identified its priority as increasing and improving housing stock, as well as access to housing according to the needs of small communities, regional centers, and Yellowknife. As such, committee is currently conducting meetings with stakeholders from communities across the Northwest Territories to focus on challenges and barriers faced by NWT residents in regards to home ownership and private market rent. Committee will provide recommendations to the government of the Northwest Territories to make changes or improvements to programs and services that support both home ownership and private market rentals across the Northwest Territories. Today with us, we have Her Worship Rebecca Ulti, Mayor of Yellowknife, and today's meeting is being live streamed on the Assembly's social media channels, and presentation materials will be available on the Legislative Assembly's website after the meeting has concluded today. So welcome, Mayor Ulti, and we really appreciate you being here with us today, and we really look forward to your presentation. To start us off, before I pass it over, I'd like to give committee members the opportunity to introduce themselves, as we have committee members here at the Legislative Assembly abiding by social distancing regulations, and we also have committee members joining us on the phone lines as well. So I'll start with the member to my left.
Thanks, Kevin O'Reilly, Frame Lake.
Katrina Nakabi, MLA Great Slave.
Rylan Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife North.
Thank you very much, and we'll pass it off to the phone lines, and we'll start with MLA Semler. Appears to be having some technical difficulties, but MLA Semler, MLA for Inuvik Twin Lakes, is on the line with us today. And so I'll pass it off to MLA Bonnet Rouge.
Ron Bonnet Rouge, MLA Decho.
Rocky Simpson, MLA Hay River South.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So thank you very much for being with us, Mayor Ulti. I'll pass it over to yourself, and if you can introduce yourself, and then also please proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Rebecca Ulti. I'm the mayor for the city of Yellowknife, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're located in Chief Dragi's territory. From time immemorial, it's been the traditional land of the Yellowknives Dene First Nation, and more recently, the homeland of the North Slave Métis. We respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Today, again, thank you very much for having me. The city will be providing a written response by the deadline of the end of this month, but did want to have the opportunity to come today to speak to a few items. We may also add a few more in our written submission, and have the opportunity to take questions from committee members. So first off, a big thank you to the Standing Committee for doing this work. Housing is one of the most pressing needs, I think, in not only Yellowknife, but the Northwest Territories, and one that we hear time and time again. So appreciate the opportunity. So if we go to my next slide. So as committee members know, there's a housing spectrum that goes from absolute homelessness all the way to private market rental and home ownership. For myself, I don't see home ownership as above private market rental. I do think that both serve their purposes, and depending on your situation, one may suit your needs better than the other. So not to glorify home ownership, I do believe that on that end of the spectrum, both are important pieces. So as committee's reviewing, though, it's about private market rentals and home ownerships. But I did want to speak to the challenges on the non-market housing side of the spectrum. As well, there's cost of building, cost of operating, electricity, heating, insurance, and taxes. And so my presentation today kind of focuses on those three buckets on the challenges as well as the ways that we can improve. So when we look at the non-market housing side of the spectrum, here in Yellowknife, our most recent point in time count was done in 2018 to identify the number of residents in Yellowknife who are currently experiencing homelessness. We were supposed to do an updated one in 2020, April, however, so everybody knows why that didn't happen. But we do hope to be able to do it again this year. So in 2018, there were 338 individuals who were experiencing homelessness in Yellowknife. That includes men, women, and children. When it comes to emergency shelters, the issue is that there's not enough adequate day or overnight shelter space for men, women, and families. In supportive housing, we don't have any permanent supportive housing options for high acuity individuals or families experiencing homelessness in Yellowknife. My apologies, I skipped transitional housing. Transitional housing, other than the Bailey House and Lynn's Place, there's no designated transitional housing in Yellowknife, and there is a need. When it comes to social housing, some of the challenges that we've heard about is there's no information available about the Yellowknife social housing wait list, so the number of individuals or the time. Individuals and families have flagged the issues that when they're on income assistance, they have to recheck in every 6 months to ensure that they're still on the waiting list, or else their income assistance can get cut off. There's no transparency that's been expressed by individuals and families on how people are prioritized for public or social housing in Yellowknife. And there's also a challenge right now that individuals who are either at risk of homelessness or who have bad rental histories need to get leases in NGOs' names, non-government organizations, which isn't sustainable either for the NGO or the renter, because that renter then doesn't create any rental history. And the private market and home ownership, there's kind of that. Well, I'll touch on the cost of building and the cost of operating. Cost of building challenges, of course, there's lots of external factors. Even the Texas ice storm recently, we've seen a dramatic increase in price to get our piped water, the pipes, as well as actually some supply chain issues of, if we don't get our order in today, we might not be able to do our water and sewer program for this summer. So there's the cost of lumber, as folks are probably aware, has increased substantially. So we could be seeing increases in the cost to build here in the north that have those external factors. But there are things that I think we can do at both the municipal and the territorial and federal level to be able to work together to address the issues that are within our control. In regards to the cost of operating, I think we all know electricity and heating and insurance are quite expensive here in the north. And that is predominantly because we have such a small population from an economic perspective. You've got a base cost of delivering these services divided by a small percentage. So our base cost is higher than if you've got a larger pool dividing that. And then taxes, and I'll touch on some ways that we can improve that in the cities, towns, and villages. If we can go to my next slide. In regards to the non-market housing side of the spectrum, ways that the government can improve programs and supports. Again, I won't touch too much because I know that's not what today's about, but I did want to bring to committee's attention, the GNWT has two great plans that can help address the non-market housing side of the spectrum. One is the action plan to reduce poverty in the NWT for 2019 to 2022. On the right side of the slide is actually, there's a pillar about housing, and it has the following 10 actions that it recommends to help in regards to housing, which isn't just about the non-market housing side. It also has ways to deal with the market house side. So I do encourage committee members to review the GNWT's action plan to reduce poverty, as well as the mental wellness and addictions recovery action plan, because as addictions can lead to homelessness, and it's tougher to get onto the road of recovery without housing. So very interconnected there. And again, there's some great recommendations and actions in the mental wellness, the GNWT's Mental Wellness and Addictions Recovery Action Plan. So do encourage members to review those and implement and fund those plans. The government renewal exercise that the GNWT is currently underway, I do encourage the GNWT to look at opportunities to, particularly for income assistance, to review and streamline. So we've heard of a lot of administrative burdens on recipients, and when they get cut off of social assistance, they can be ejected into homelessness again, and the cycle never ends. We've also heard about inadequate current income assistance benefit levels and the need to keep up with housing costs. So even though you get income assistance, it's not enough to rent. So again, really making sure that when dealing with housing, that there's a whole government approach, and really the need for more wraparound services to ensure people can stay in their housing. In the middle of my slide, I do have a figure from the city's 10-year plan to end homelessness, and it talks about managing or ending homelessness. You'll note shelters, so we can continue on the system and fund shelters, jails, and hospitals, and that costs about $66,000 to $120,000 per person per year. Or we can provide housing with supports, which would cost about $13,000 to $18,000 per person per year. Again, there's, I think, a human element to this, but also a financial element. In regards to federal funding, it's also the federal government's priority to address housing, and so I really encourage the GNWT to work with the federal government to try to maximize as much as possible the money coming to the north. And to also look at the cost per door, because I know budgeting, sometimes we say, oh, we'll just do 6 units here, it'll cost X amount, and in 5 or 10 years, we'll come back to this community and do 6 more. In the private market, you wouldn't have, there's the cost of doing, the core cost of building, and then once you get above that, that's when you actually start making money. So the GNWT to take that business lens of what's the break-even point of building houses, and to try to budget a bit more that way. And the Government of Canada has, through their co-investment fund, they are committed to transfer up to $200 million in federal lands to, so here in Yellowknife, that some federal housing includes the Aspen Apartment, which is a 36-unit. They also have many townhouses as well as single detached dwellings actually in Yellowknife. And so encourage the GNWT to get into discussions with the federal government to look at what are surplus houses and units in Yellowknife, and how can we, and other communities. I know that they also have units up in Inuvik. And this may be a way that a cheaper way for the federal and territorial government, dollars per cost of a door to implement. So encourage committee to reach out to CMHC to discuss the federal surplus units. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the private market rentals and home ownership, I think there's a lot that municipalities and the territorial government can do to work together. Again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of external factors that are difficult, the cost of lumber and accessing steel. But the things that we can control is the permitting process. And so in the government renewal exercise, I encourage the government to work with municipalities so we can do that desktop exercise to review and streamline our processes together. I met with the City of Edmonton back in 2019, and they were doing a streamlined process of their permitting process. And the process really focused on risk and analytics, the financial review, the application journey, then the process improvements and technology enhancements that they can do. When they started to review their process improvement, one of them was the rezoning process. So if an applicant comes forward and wants to rezone a process, they actually identified that there was 357 steps at the time, and it required 182 decisions. So from there, they were able to find ways that they could streamline their process. When it came to their safety codes and inspections, they really took a look at reducing overmanagement of risk using data to improve efficiency, which maximizes the value of staff time and really can get projects going quicker. So again, what they did was they looked at their safety code risks and realized that some of their risks they were under mitigating and some of their risks they were over mitigating. And so with limited resources, they did the hierarchy of risks, and they focused more attention on risk one and spent less attention on, or found ways to appropriately mitigate, say, risk 4, which they currently were over mitigating. Their safety codes inspections, they went through, their plumbing inspections, their HVAC inspections, their footing and foundation inspections, and they saw that there was actually the footing and foundation inspections, close to 100% of them were able to pass the inspection on the first way. So they were able to streamline some of the process when it was identified that it was a lower risk safety code inspection requirement. So not to get into too much detail on this stuff, but I think there's an opportunity for the municipal and territorial governments, and I say that both parties are involved because the Fire Prevention Act is where applicants have to go to get their development permits reviewed from the fire perspective. One of the things that we've requested as municipalities through the NWT Association of Communities resolution is to have to delegate and resource community governments with the fire reviews. And so this would be one-stop shopping basically for applicants. They come to the city with their development permit, their building permit, and they're able to not jump from our government to your government. They're able to do it all at once. So from a client perspective, I think we all see the one-stop shopping provides some good results. The other thing I would mention on the Fire Prevention Act, and I know that's being reviewed by this assembly, is that taking a look at the appeals process, because right now it goes to the minister. Committee may want to look at Ontario's example where the appeal process goes to a tribunal for review. So if somebody's would like to dispute the order, it goes to the tribunal as opposed to a political rep for review. And again, the red tape reduction working group, I think there's opportunities there as well. Whether it's through the red tape reduction working group or the government renewal exercise, I think that's where we can work together to streamline the building process as much as possible for applicants. If we go to my next slide, please. And then, of course, once you've purchased your house, there's the cost of operating, or once you're in your apartment or condo, you're all doing the shared operating, and that can be a lot for residents. We definitely hear it on electricity and heating, some of the big costs here in the north. So some of the things the committee may want to look at is the opportunity to work together on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as reducing the cost of operating in regards to electricity and heating. Alternatives North did a great review last year, I believe it was. Last April they released it. And some of the recommendations was construction of biomass and cogeneration district heating systems. I've also met with a mayor in Finland and discussed how their community got into the district heating, and it started in the 60s where they when they're ripping up their roads, water, and sewer, they're putting in the district heating for the heat generation and electricity. So if there is an opportunity for the city, the GNWT, and the federal government to work together on these district heating systems, I think it can be a big win for residents. More outside of Yellowknife would be the waste heat recovery from diesel generators. And I know there's been presentations from Mr. Jeff Phillips on the benefits of this, particularly in Fort Providence, and encourage the committee to look at it in other communities as well. There's, great savings for residents, the GNWT, and businesses in that regard. And then the renewable diesel subsidy, looking into providing a subsidy so that renewable diesel is on par from a price perspective with diesel. So anything that we can do to improve our electricity and heating systems here in the north from a greenhouse gas and financial perspective, I think is important. When it comes to insurance, I think it's one that we don't think about often, but taking a look again from both a greenhouse gas and a financial perspective, but creating a program similar to, say, the Arctic Energy Alliance's energy efficiency programs, where homeowners can get money for making switches. There is a need from an insurance perspective. For example, older modular homes can't get insurance if they have poly B piping, so that the homeowners need to get that switch to PEX plumbing. $3,000 to $6,000, but is there an opportunity, whether it's a funding program like the Arctic Energy Alliance, whether it's through a local improvement charge? There's also GeneraLink, which is about providing kind of a generator system at homes so that they're covered during long-term power outages, which can help reduce the breaking of or busting of pipes and all the water damage. We have seen a few insurance, I'm going to mess up the terms, companies versus brokerages, but leave the north. There's not enough to insure here in the north, and so you're not generating enough in premiums versus all the damage that happens in the north. So a lot of, so for example, trailers, or any home, when they get water damage, the average cost of replacing that's about $40,000. That home's not likely to generate that much in premiums over the course of the cycle of the insurance. So we have lost some insurance companies, which as we lose more, or if we lose more and more, the cost of insurance could go up. So taking a look at some of those opportunities where homeowners can also decrease their premiums by changing from their current roof to a metal roof, there's cost savings there. So the idea was also thrown around about an app to let homeowners know about the different ways that they can keep their insurance premiums as low as possible by doing certain things to keep the maintenance of their home up, or even those, did you know, making a switch from an on-demand hot water can reduce your insurance premiums. Something to consider when the next time your hot water tank blows, maybe you want to change to hot water on demand, reduce your electricity bill, reduce your insurance premiums. So I know that education and apps and all that stuff is probably a low return, medium cost, but something to consider. Maybe it's just even some social media campaigns about that. And then in regards to taxes, just make the continuous plug about transferring vacant commissioners' land within municipal boundaries to municipalities. So how does that benefit residents and their taxes? Well, as we can grow our tax base, it's more people paying, therefore each person has to pay a little bit less of the pie. Here in Yellowknife, we put in a request last March to transfer a leasehold interest out in Bee Lake for a quarry. Dayton Show was looking to build a quarry so they can bid on a contract with the giant mine. We're still waiting to hear about that lease. So that's a whole year that a business hasn't been up and operating. That's a loss in municipal taxes, it's also a loss at the territorial level from income taxes. So by having the red tape, the cumbersome transferring of vacant commissioners' land, we're not able to generate more taxes with more users, as opposed to just, instead of growing the pie, we just have to give everybody more to pay for their slice of the pie. And closing the municipal funding gap would also do the same thing. It's, in 2014, the GNWT created a formula that said, this is how much it costs for municipal governments to run and operate their core services. However, we still aren't being funded to provide those core services as per the GNWT's funding formula. And therefore, when we're not receiving the right amount to provide those services, we do have to go to residents and increase taxes or decrease services, which is a tough discussion when it's water, sewer, garbage collection. There's some things that are non-negotiable, therefore it does require taxes. So from a tax perspective, with those two items, taxes could be kept reasonable for residents. I did provide a bit of some background slides. That's just for committee for further information. We have a lot of information in our 10-year plan to end homelessness. Actually, I guess if you want to just go one more slide. So our 10-year plan to end homelessness has a breakdown on how many units and in which category would be required to end homelessness in Yellowknife. So it anticipated 180 affordable housing units would be required, 80 permanent supportive housing units, 200 rent supplements, 15 rapid housing and prevention, so a program with capacity to support 15 people, housing first case management load of 20 people, and permanent supportive housing for 85 units. There's also, I think that the Stats Canada's 2019 NWT community survey, I think, is important information for committee members to review. Here in Yellowknife, our biggest issue is not affordable. So, in the core housing needs, there's not adequate, not affordable, and not suitable. When you combine those three together, 40% of households in Yellowknife fall in one of those three categories. If you break those down into actual numbers, because I think sometimes percentages can seem obscure, not affordable is 2,100 units. 2,100 households in Yellowknife are not affordable. So that means that people are paying more than 30% of their household income for housing. So again, sometimes we get caught up in thinking about or looking at percentages, and just remind committee to also take a look at those numbers, because those are individual residents, and we can sometimes get confused, I think, or perhaps the problem doesn't look as big as it seems when we just look at percentages. I will leave it at that, because would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ulti. We really appreciate your presentation and appreciate your time today to do the presentation. I'll just jump right to committee. Committee members, does anybody have any questions or comments for Mayor Ulti today? MLA Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mayor Ulti, for presenting today. A great presentation, and I think there's a lot of agreement in the room with the things you said and the directions we need to head, whether that is with the Fire Prevention Act or, trying to get the land finally transferred to the city of Yellowknife. And I guess it's always sobering to revisit the 10-year plan to end homelessness and look at the number of units there. As you know, we just got a big $60 million announcement from the federal government, and that gave us about 90 units, and there's about 500 on the screen just to end homelessness in Yellowknife. So I don't think it's any secret that this is a $500 million or so problem for the Northwest Territories. But all that being said, I was hoping you could kind of give us an update on any initiatives the city has to add more units in this area. I know that the federal government came out and said rapid rehousing, and everyone scrambled to get applications in, and that unfortunately many of those were not successful, and they went into the co-investment fund. But does the city of Yellowknife currently have an application in to get moved to the co-investment fund, or was that kind of just a one-time thing because the money is there? Is the city have any further plans to apply for money in this area? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Emily Johnson. Mayor Ulti?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. We put in an application for the rapid housing because money was available. We don't have plans yet to transfer it to the co-investment. I had met with the federal minister of housing last week, and I did express, as much as they're like, well, just move everything over to co-investment, co-investment takes a lot of time. And, the minister did say that CMHC is working to streamline the process, but applicants like Avens and the Women's Society still is outstanding for their application. That's 2 years in the works. We just don't have anybody on staff that's able to follow a project through like that. And so what we are doing, and we'll stay tuned for the federal budget's announcement, I guess following Monday, to see if Rapid Housing 2.0 comes out. But so what we do have the federal fundings reaching home. So that is where we've been providing funding for Housing First, and I think we've seen some good results. And we have 3 different streams for Housing First. We have it for adults, for families, as well as for youth. And then outside of the non-market housing, we are currently in the process of updating our zoning bylaws since we approved our community plan in last summer. And when we approved our community plan, it was a focus on more infill and density as opposed to greenfield, which from a tax perspective, it reduces taxes when we're building on already established infrastructure. So, when we build a new greenfield, it means that we've got more kilometers of road to pave, we've got more kilometers of road to clear snow, we've got to now probably provide a bus because residents are going to need to come and go, versus when you build on already developed infrastructure, those costs are already there with the city, and so you're just increasing your revenue but keeping your expenses the same. After we're done the zoning bylaw, we'll be updating our development incentive bylaw. So right now what we have is we have a development incentive bylaw, and it encourages, or you can get a tax abatement for developing residential downtown to try to encourage that. So once we have our zoning bylaw in place, we'll update our development incentive bylaw, and we'll be putting incentives in to try to drive the behavior and the policy objectives that we want, that were established in our community plan and then our zoning bylaw. So kind of a few things that the city is doing to try to address housing in Yellowknife.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. Emily Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I actually think that, there's a lot of work that can probably be done in partnering with the kind of looking at how the zoning works and that work going forward with GNWT and the Fire Prevention Act. And I think GNWT would also be responsible for, gas inspections and OBMs and a number of other areas of inspections. I guess my other question in this area is kind of the how it would be possible to get the city of Yellowknife more involved in the homeless portfolio. And I know that's always hard considering the GNWT doesn't even really have the money to solve the problem, and neither does the city of Yellowknife. But I guess one of my concerns is when we meet with the Yellowknife Housing Authority, they want to go get more money, and they're told by the Northwest Territories Housing Corporation they can't build more units in Yellowknife. The priority is largely outside of Yellowknife, which I understand. From a systemic point of view, the majority of homeless people who find themselves homeless in Yellowknife aren't from Yellowknife. So, if you're trying to provide housing in the communities, you're actually lowering the number of homeless individuals in Yellowknife. So I get that policy position, but I think what's happened is that there are some very common sense things that we could be doing with public housing in Yellowknife. Building new housing units as opposed to renting with Northview would actually save the Housing Corp money. They've done the cost benefit analysis that it's cheaper for them to own units than it is to rent. And the Yellowknife Housing Authority wants to do that, but the Northwest Territories Housing Corporation won't let them. So that's a bit of one of my things I'm trying to work on. But I guess, are there models of how municipalities have taken on more of a role in housing? Like, is there a vision you could see where the Yellowknife Housing Authority perhaps reports to the city of Yellowknife? I mean, obviously that would come with funding and all of those concerns, but are there other municipalities who've kind of taken on more of the public housing from their provincial or territorial counterparts? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Emily Johnson. Mayor Ulti?
Thank you. And I've been in a conference all week about constitutional change in cities. So yeah, if, you know, in places like Ontario, the province has delegated that authority. And when you delegate authority, delegating resources to municipalities. But in places where municipalities haven't been delegated the authority and haven't been delegated the resources, it's a challenge, because municipalities are maintaining 60% of public infrastructure, but with only 10% of taxes. So, you know, every time we move outside of our mandate and focus on another order of government, we've got to take money from one pot that is currently underfunded to put it towards that other pot. And the one thing that I'm hearing at the Yellowknife Housing Authority is just the need for more of those wraparound services to be able to, quote unquote, graduate people into the private market rentals. So anything that can, you know, the income assistance program, the fact that people aren't provided with enough money to pay rent, people getting cut off their income assistance is, you know, evicting people into homelessness again. And then the need for those wraparound services. So, you know, the Department of Health, the Department of ECE, Housing Corporation, Housing Authority, all working together, I think is key to getting people to move along the spectrum and to ensure that we're not regressing and going the other way on the spectrum. But yeah, definitely in touch with a lot of colleagues across the country at the municipal level and trying to hear about what anybody's doing. But basically, it's a lot of lobbying at the federal and provincial levels to try to get more funding to build more in their communities.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. Emily Nakabi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, just thank you very much for this presentation. I always find your presentations to us very informative, and I look forward to actually talking to you more offline about this and picking your brain. Again, I'm pretty new to the housing portfolio, so trying to wrap my head around all the different layers and funding pots, et cetera, that you're looking at is a little bit difficult. So I guess my first question is around the proposals for the rapid housing that were denied. Is there an easy way to take the proposal and then just sort of refit it for another type of funding pot application? Or do you have to go through another entire proposal process each time you look at these? Or do you just sort of, in the consulting world, we never start from scratch again, right? So I'm just curious to know if there's some element of that when you talk about capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Nakabi. Mayor Ulti?
Thank you. The rapid housing was definitely a more simplified version. So to move from the rapid housing to co-investment requires quite a bit more information. But saying that, so like the city of Yellowknife would require extensive amount of work and consultants and money to move it to that phase, versus the Yellowknife Women's Society, who was in the co-investment to try to get money for the Arnica Inn. CMHC told them to go to the rapid housing, so they transferred over, tried for that, got denied, and now they're punted back to the co-investment. The thing I flagged with the federal minister of housing was just that I've heard from applicants that, they'll put in an energy audit and they'll say, go get that peer reviewed. And so every time, and this is a message for all of us, all levels of government, every time that you have to go get another audit, another review, another report done, it's costing money, which gets passed down to the resident. And then every day that this project's not going forward, I guess more in the private market space, is, they get a loan out to start the project to buy the land, and every day that this application's sitting on either a city desk or a GNWT desk, that person's generating or getting interest on their loan, and they have no revenue to pay for it. So just kind of those, mindful of why we're asking for stuff, mindful of how much all these reports and consultants cost to these NGOs and private market developers, and then cognizant of the cost of an application sitting on the desk. But sorry, to answer your question, it's not really that easy to just slide the paper over. So other projects like the YWCA and the Women's Society, I think they're farther along because they were going to go co-investment, then heard about the rapid housing. So they just kind of like flip-flop to different pots. But the city's proposal was just going to be for rapid housing.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. MLA Nakabi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That all makes sense and sort of speaks to a general conversation we've been having for a long time about, supports for NGOs, municipalities, groups to write proposals to the federal government, regardless of whether it's housing or, other situations. I just wanted to come back quickly to a comment that was made with Child and Family Services about not offloading a program or problem to Indigenous organizations or municipalities that was already broken. And I kind of feel this might be a bit of the same if we were to come to the city of Yellowknife and say, you need to take on a larger role in homelessness. We're sort of setting you up to fail. So I guess that was just more of a comment I wanted to make there. I guess my next question is specific to the Aspen apartments that you mentioned. I have a real concern that a lot of the stock or things that are being offered to the Northwest Territories are often not in wonderful condition, and they come with a lot of costs of themselves. So not only does it take a while to get to the point where you're getting a building, once you actually have the offer of a building, there's potential for remediation work that's needed, land, environmental concerns, things as such. And when you're looking at municipalities or Indigenous organizations or NGOs, the sophistication maybe is not always there to realize that they're taking on liability. So I guess my question is the city looking at Aspen? And if so, what would we be doing to address that? Thank you.
Thank you, MLA Nakabi. Mayor Ulti.
Thank you. The federal government actually took Aspen off the table. They had offered it they were going to surplus it. And so it was, 36 unit apartment building. Is there any local housing NGO that wants to take it on? Somebody looked at it. As you mentioned, it did require a lot of renovations. So they just didn't have the financial capacity to do those renos. So they declined. So the federal government decided to keep it. And so they're going to use it for staff housing. But yes, it should always be taken into consideration to not offload a lemon. But the co-investment fund that the federal government likes to say is easy and come get all the money. But one thing is you could also apply to get funding to cover those renovation costs. So the rapid housing was going to offer not only the federal surplus housing unit, they were also going to offer money for renovations and stuff. So yeah, just trying to navigate the system of funding. And I will do a plug for, there was the mayor of a municipality, in Ontario, but just said the biggest thing that the federal government could do, and I think all governments can take it into consideration, is reduce red tape by reducing these application processes. So you're asking other orders of government to put all this time, and you're asking NGOs to put time and money into these applications. Is there a different way to distribute the money? So if you are advocating at the federal level to try to, base plus as opposed to application processes where little tiny municipalities don't have, and little tiny NGOs don't have the in-house, so then they're having to pay to outsource the service of getting an application written.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. MLA Simpson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank the Mayor for that presentation as well. I guess my question, I guess, is with respect to we hear the Housing Corporation spending a lot of their resources, both financial and human resources, on doing repairs to existing units, and they haven't been focusing as much on new build, except for now with the support from the federal government. So I'm just wondering how Yellowknife deals with that, or what the mayor thinks with respect to putting more emphasis on putting apartments or houses on the ground versus the repair portion. I understand that houses do need repair, but in Hay River we've got a waiting list of 50 people, and I told the Minister of Housing, that's my number one concern. I don't care, and whatever else you're going to do, that's fine, but my number one concern is how are we going to put these 50 people plus in housing, because right now some of them are living on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Simpson. Mayor Ulti?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the things that our 10-year plan to end homelessness did was to look at the cost of, status quo so it's managing versus ending homelessness. And it would require, that bump up to get ahead of these problems. But if you're not going to bump up the budget, you're just going to continue to invest in justice and in hospitals. So yes, there's probably that extra bump that's going to be required to get ahead of these problems, and then hopefully the budget can come in justice and health can come down in the future because people are now housed and not using the services of other departments as much. So again, it'll take that one-time top up, but should hopefully level off when the other services aren't needed as much. The other thing that I think is important, though, is to start looking at the life cycle costs of buildings. So, when it comes to the utilities, maybe it requires spending a little bit more up front in the capital so that you're spending less on a monthly basis. And so making sure that we do a bit more of that analysis to make sure that we're looking at the whole cost, the life cycle cost of that asset, to make sure that we can actually afford it going forward. And that would be, I guess, my big point is I think it is going to require that a couple year bump up, and hopefully we'll start to see less need for other departments in the future.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. MLA Simpson?
Thank you, and thank you for that. I guess one issue there, and I guess I'm kind of looking at Hay River, and there's a development going ahead here. Will probably be 29 lots, which will really have no impact on providing housing to people who need it in terms of public housing units. It won't do anything, I don't think, to really lower that 50 plus number on the waiting list. So I'm just wondering what the city of Yellowknife, how do you deal with the NIMBY attitude of people in the community and in the development areas? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Simpson. Mayor Ulti?
The $1 million question. The one thing that actually in the federal government's national housing strategy, they were supposed to take action to create these campaigns to address not in my backyard when it comes to homelessness and the non-market side of the spectrum. But they reallocated the funding to a different program. So I would encourage the GNWT to lobby the feds to revise that, because it is a challenge, and we can each work on our own communications campaign about the right to housing and the benefit to the communities, or we can all work together and spend less resources in the end because we're not all off doing our own things. So I welcome the opportunity to work with other municipalities, the GNWT and the federal government. I've been having conversations with communities down south, and it's an issue across North America and I'm sure the world, but definitely it's a lot of community discussions and communications that are needed. And so if we can pool our resources together to create that material, I think we'd be serving our residents well.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. MLA Bonnet Rouge.
Merci, Madam Chair, and merci to Your Worship, Ms. Ulti, for her presentation. I know municipalities, whether it's cities or hamlets or settlements, provide services to look after city infrastructure such as roads and water, sewer, and development permits, I suppose in your case. So I don't think you're more into the housing market area. I know a lot of some groups refuse to go in that area since it could be a money losing venture, or it could be profitable. But I know municipalities are not so much into providing housing for rental units. You don't have, I guess, be capable of running everything like this. But my question, I guess, is, and you mentioned like possibly applying for the co-investment funding or stuff like that, and I'm just wondering if you would require a business development corporation in order to get into the housing market or to apply for national co-investment funding. That'd be my question, Mussy.
Thank you, MLA Bonnet Rouge. Mayor Ulti.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. We wouldn't require a business development corporation. We could do it on our own. It would be, like you mentioned, us moving further or beyond our mandates. It'd be, again, mandates and authorities and responsibilities for all levels of government have evolved a lot since the original Constitution and the most recent amendment in 1982. But with our rapid housing one, we were going to secure the capital and then transfer it over to a local housing NGO to operate, since they're the ones best suited to do it, because they know, we don't have that experience at the city level. So we're not, we applied for the rapid housing just to try to make sure we leave no pot untouched in that regards. But the co-investment fund, we're more supporting local NGOs, whether it's letters of support, if there's other things we can do in the development permit or from a tax abatement perspective. So really looking to support local housing NGOs as opposed to do it ourselves.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. MLA Bonnet Rouge.
Yeah, thank you for that one there. Yeah, I know, because some of the hamlets and stuff like that, in order to get into any business type of venture, they would have to form a development corporation, an arm of it, but it has to have the blessing of MACA and everyone else, as you may be competing with local contractors. I just wanted to get back to your homelessness numbers. You stated approximately 388 individuals. And I know there's many organizations within Yellowknife. I don't think I can count them on both hands, I don't know, but like the Women's Society, YWCA, everybody that's running all these major buildings there, former motels and whatnot. I'm wondering if there's any collaboration with the city of the city of Yellowknife undertakes to pool these groups together and discuss the numbers, because we get your number, we get somebody else's, another group's a different number, so those numbers keep escalating. It could be the same group of people, and then, the government is hit from all these organizations for housing, and it could be for the same number of people. I'm just wondering if you could touch upon that issue. Masi.
Thank you, Emily Bonnerouge. Mayor Ulti?
Thank you. Yeah, through the federal government, we receive what they call Reaching Home funding. So it's just over $1 million a year, and the majority of it goes to Housing First. But there's also a component that to access this funding, we do have to do some of that data collection. So we're required to do what they call a point-in-time count, and it's just a snapshot on one day. So the most recent one was 2018. So that's one data collection that we're doing. But there's also and I can get staff to send over some more information to your staff to send out to the rest of the committee. But there is work being done to create a centralized system so that, that you're not duplicate or double counting individuals when they come into the system through the many different NGOs. So I can send over more information on that if committee's interested.
Thank you, Mayor Ulti. No, we would be very interested in receiving all of the information that you have at your fingertips for sure, so we really appreciate that. I'm going to pass the line over to MLA O'Reilly.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for the presentation, Mayor Ulti. I'm just wondering, I know that the city has a community advisory board on homelessness, and I don't think it was mentioned anywhere in your presentation, but from what I've seen and heard, I guess it's been a collaborative exercise in sharing information and bringing folks together. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned from that experience. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MLA O'Reilly. Mayor Ulti?
Thank you. Yeah, so our Community Advisory Board on Homelessness is created because we received the federal funding. So the federal government has some requirements on terms of reference. So there is representatives from various housing NGOs, and one of the challenges is that there's not a seat at the table for everybody. So, if we have two individuals applying to be the youth rep from two different organizations, we can only select one. So in the city's 10-year plan to end homelessness, and actually the GNWT's last anti-poverty strategy action plan recommended an interagency, which would mean that all housing NGOs would, as well as others serving residents who are experiencing homelessness, would come to the table and an opportunity to share. And so we would welcome that opportunity to get that up and going again. I know Inuvik has one that's been successful, and I'm not quite sure why it was dropped from the most recent anti-poverty strategy, but it's one that local NGOs here in town have said would be of interest or value.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ulti. MLA O'Reilly?
Yeah, thanks for that. I understand, though, that I think your community advisory board is still going, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about what they're doing currently in terms of, I know the city also has a homelessness strategy. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about those two things. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Emily O'Reilly. Mayor Ulti?
Thank you. So the Community Advisory Board on Homelessness, their big item is how to allocate the federal funding every year. So last year we had a top up because of COVID, and so there was lots of meetings last year to be able to allocate that amount of funding. But yeah, the core term of reference for the committee is how to allocate the funding, and then meeting on a regular basis to get updates on how it's going, and then to make decisions about some of the work on the point in time count, as well as the other data collection. But the core focus is on how to allocate the federal funding, versus we used to have a committee that was the Social Issues Committee, and they had a broader mandate, but this one was really just focused on the federal funding. And we should be doing an update to council as well as the public on our 10-year plan to end homelessness. And if committee was interested, I can come back and present where what we've accomplished to date and what we're looking to achieve in the coming years. So if committee was interested, I'd be happy to come back and provide an update on that.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ulti. And absolutely, right now we are focused on the home ownership and the market rent portion of kind of the housing continuum, but we're definitely going to be working through all of the lenses, and we value your input for sure. Members, are there any additional questions this morning for Mayor Ulti? Seeing and hearing none, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of regular members to thank you so much for your time this morning. We know your time is very valuable, and we really appreciate having your perspective for the work that we're doing right now. And so a tremendously huge thank you from committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
This afternoon as well, for the public, we'll be meeting with Ms. Arlene Hache, who is with the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network. And Arlene is a longtime community advocate, and so that will be happening live as well at 1 p.m. today. And so I invite community members to log in as well and listen live at 1 p.m. And again, thank you so much for your time this morning, Mayor Ulti. And can I have a motion to go in camera? Thank you, MLA Nakabi. We will now move in camera. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.